Good afternoon. I'm Keith Laughlin, president of Rails Trails Conservancy, and I'm joined here today by two of my colleagues, Katie Guerin, our head of strategic initiatives, and Brandi Horton, our vice president for communications. We have a session today there's a session at the summit on mobility, disruption, and the built environment. And this is an issue that Rails Trails has been spending quite a bit of time on over the course of the last year. And so we wanted to provide this background in advance of the summit to give you an opportunity to begin to think through some of these issues that will be raised in Milwaukee. Disruption has always been a force for change. In 1830, the Tom Thumb, America's first steam locomotive, traveled from Baltimore to Ellicott City, Maryland at an amazing speed of 18 miles per hour. By 1850, this disruptive technology was at the center of American life. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, linking the vast North American continent from coast to coast. The first transportation revolution had occurred, and the age of the railroad was in full bloom. But another disruptive technology was on the horizon. The dawn of the 20th century saw the introduction of the automobile. With time, automobiles became ubiquitous, leading to the demise of the railroads and America's second transportation revolution, the age of the automobile. With the decline of the railroad, thousands of miles of rail corridor were no longer needed. From that disruption, the Rail Trail movement and Rails Trails Conservancy were born. Since then, more than 22,000 miles of trails have been built from abandoned rail lines in communities across America. Right now, we live in another time of disruption, and with change come both threats and opportunities. Today, we are here to share our optimism about the opportunities created by America's third transportation revolution.
In 1939, General Motors introduced a vision to the world that promised convenience, independence, happiness, all courtesy of the automobile. At the World's Fair in New York City, GM's Futurama exhibit introduced the public to a future suburban utopia, designed around the car and connected via a national network of multi-lane highways. Instead of fitting automobiles into our traditional communities, this was a future where our communities would be built around the automobile. Post-World War II prosperity fueled the rapid suburbanization of America. Many people fled the city in pursuit of suburban happiness. The way that suburbs were designed created long distances between home and work, school, shopping, and play. Driving became the only practical way to get from point A to point B. Just 7 years following GM's Futurama exhibit and futuristic vision, our lives were altered significantly. By 1946, we had fully entered the age of the automobile. We weren't yet at the 14-lane superhighways that GM had predicted, but the automobile had become central to American culture. As the age of the automobile blossomed in the decades that followed, we learned that it wasn't the shiny, happy future that had been promised. Highways cut through towns and cities, essentially isolating entire segments of the population and disconnecting communities. Cars literally separated people from each other and from the places where they lived and worked. As cars became the dominant mode of transportation, quality of life suffered. Air quality declined, green space was lost to sprawl, and traffic congestion choked our roadways. In many places, walking and biking became difficult, even dangerous. We chose cars for our shortest trips. Our lifestyles became more sedentary, and chronic disease spiked. Our car culture had become central to our lives. For more than 70 years, automobiles have been the predominant mode of transportation for the majority of places in this country. It's hard to imagine something new. Until now, the next transportation revolution is underway. It's an era that we're calling the age of connectivity, both for its genesis and its potential, for its origins in technology, and the opportunity it creates to connect people and places in ways like never before.
Several significant factors underscore the changes afoot. Our driving behavior suggests that cars might not be as central to our lives as they once were. For the first time in 60 years, vehicle miles traveled began to level off in 2004. High gas prices exacerbated the situation, and the amount we drove hit rock bottom during the recession. Even as our economy improves, however, it doesn't appear that driving trends will follow traditional patterns. Bottom line, driving simply isn't increasing at the same rate it once was. Biking is on the rise. The most recent census data shows that the number of people biking to work has grown at a faster rate than any other mode of travel. And with the adoption of e-bikes and the introduction of dockless bike share, we can expect that this trend in mode share will continue. Young adults, they're far less reliant on cars than their parents, driving less and walking and biking and taking public transportation more. Personal car ownership is no longer the quintessential rite of passage. Owning a smartphone now carries that title. Even older Americans are driving less. At least 1 in 5 who are over the age of 65 do not drive. They want to live in walkable, livable places, and they want the independence that will let them stay in their homes and communities for as long as possible. And finally, we're technically more connected than we've ever been. Almost every single person in our country has a smartphone or a mobile phone. Digital technology is everywhere, and it's significantly changing how we live our lives.
One dramatic example of how digital technology is transforming our lives is the emergence of the sharing economy. In the sharing economy, consumers share access to a resource when they need it, rather than each person individually owning it. The most obvious examples are ride sharing and bike share, with Uber and Lyft among the poster children. In recent years, the sharing economy has exploded. Bike share's growth has been incredible. More than 88 million rides have been logged on shared bikes since the concept was introduced less than a decade ago. And although Uber didn't launch until 2011, it now provides 40 million rides in a single month. This is no fluke. The rapid growth of the sharing economy, particularly ride sharing, will continue because economics will challenge traditional patterns of car ownership. Let's explore the math. A recent study found that people currently pay nearly $1 per mile to drive their personal vehicle, and that adds up. For a vehicle driven 13,000 miles a year, the average amount most Americans drive, that's an annual expenditure of $13,000. The same study found that shifting from today's personally owned vehicles to a radically different new generation of automotive technology that will be available as a shared fleet could reduce cost per mile driven by 2/3. Imagine cutting your transportation costs from $13,000 each year to $4,000 each year. That's life-changing. In this future scenario, no one will say you can't own a private vehicle, but many people won't want one because it won't make sense economically. This will be powerful, and it will dramatically change how we get where we want to go. It already has, but it isn't the age of connectivity's only disruption.
In fact, the most disruptive technology is just now coming up on the horizon. The marriage of two mobile technologies, the smartphone and the self-driving car. Rapid advances in digital technology are making the once futuristic concept of self-driving cars a reality. Such vehicles will be introduced into our communities one way or the other in the next decade. Some projections indicate that 95% of the miles we travel by the year 2030 will be in shared, autonomous electric vehicles. That might sound like pie in the sky, but the speed by which new technologies are introduced and adopted is a significant factor propelling the age of connectivity. In just a few short years, self-driving cars will dramatically change both how we get around and the shape of our communities. They're already being piloted in a handful of cities across the country. Autonomous Ubers can be found all over Pittsburgh, and in Ann Arbor, Michigan, you can have your Domino's delivered in an autonomous Ford. Cities want to get the implementation of this technology right, and corporations want to get it to market. Working together, you can bet that it will all happen more quickly than we imagine. Depending on the scenario you envision, however, the optimistic one or the nightmare one, this may or may not be a good thing. In the nightmare scenario, we continue to build our communities around the car. Autonomous vehicles are promoted as just another option for personal vehicle ownership. Everyone will have one or two. Self-driving cars would be mixed in traffic with traditional cars, bicyclists, and pedestrians. The unpredictability would make safe implementation nearly impossible. Congestion would actually get worse as these cars circle the block while we sit in a restaurant. The optimistic scenario depends upon two essential conditions. First, that the majority of self-driving cars be part of a shared fleet and not privately owned. Second, people must come first when retrofitting our communities to accommodate this new technology. The recent tragic accident in Tempe, Arizona underscores the urgency with which we must advocate for infrastructure and policies that prioritize safety. We cannot afford to continue designing our communities around the car. This means that 21st century communities must focus on ensuring the safe and convenient mobility of bicyclists and pedestrians.
When the automobile replaced the railroad as America's primary mode of transportation, our infrastructure needs changed. Rail corridors were abandoned, roads and highways were built. In an effort to preserve these priceless rail corridors, they were converted into multi-purpose trails. The disruption caused by the age of connectivity will have a similar effect. As we use our roads differently, we'll have the opportunity to rethink how we use automobile infrastructure. Consider how we use our roads now. It's not as much for driving as you'd think. Presently, most of us pay tens of thousands of dollars for vehicles that are idle about 95% of the time. On average, cars are actually only driven 3.7% of the time. The rest of the time, they're either parked, looking for parking, or sitting in traffic. Imagine turning that scenario on its head, where cars are in use 95% of the time and parked less than 4% of the time. Imagine the fleets of autonomous vehicles are available on demand to be summoned on your cell phone anytime you needed one. If the cars in this shared fleet were in use 95% of the time, the system could provide the same number of car trips with far fewer cars. And with fewer cars, there'd be no need for on-street parking. This frees up the roadway for new biking and walking infrastructure. With this excess roadway, we could create networks of separated bike paths, road to trail projects in every community in America.
We want to make sure that we fully conveyed what revolutionary change this would be in the places we live. Since the age of the automobile fully took hold in 1946, the car has been the supreme mode of transportation. Everything else has been an afterthought. The age of connectivity has the potential to dramatically change that. Cars will still be significant, but not supreme. Instead, we have the opportunity to have a balanced transportation system, one built around people, not machines. You will still use cars to get around, but how you use cars will change. In a 21st century community, there will be a menu of mobility options available that will include cars, transit, bicycling, and walking. This whole system will be connected by digital technology in ways that we cannot yet fully imagine.
The age of connectivity is here. The sharing economy is established and it is powerful. Self-driving cars are on the horizon. Major changes are taking place right now to get communities ready for all of this new technology. Choices about our infrastructure will be before us in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe even sooner, that will determine whether we achieve the optimistic scenario or suffer the nightmare scenario. Will we passively allow bicycling and walking to be an afterthought? Or will we take a more aggressive stance and put forward a vision of the future that puts trails, biking, and walking at the center of our lives? In response to that existential question, Rails to Trails Conservancy has developed a 3-part strategy to create regional trail and active transportation systems that will position our movement to make that optimistic scenario a reality. Our strategy is designed to foster 3 kinds of change. First, we advocate for changes in public policy at the national, state, and local levels to dramatically increase public investment in creating safe places to walk and bike. Second, we work to target those public investments to catalyze changes in public infrastructure. We are working in close partnership with local communities, many of you on the line right now, to create a portfolio of model projects, Trail Nation projects, that demonstrate the benefits of regional trail and active transportation systems. This work in the San Francisco Bay Area, Southeast Wisconsin, the industrial heartland, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, Miami, and South Texas, is designed to catalyze the development of trail networks nationwide. These projects bring our trail network vision to life. They're literally laboratories where we can test our theories about the transformative power of trails. We've also asked 12 more places everyone else who's on the phone, we hope, from everywhere, Billings, Montana, Colorado Springs, to Memphis, New Orleans, Sacramento, San Diego, St. Louis, to join the Trail Nation Collaborative so that we can engage a broad coalition of stakeholders who are committed to the rapid replication of trail networks. This entire group, we're so excited, will come together in just a few short weeks in Milwaukee. And the purpose is that by learning from what's already happening on the ground, we can make great strides toward our goal of connecting the country by trail. Finally, it's not enough to just build this new infrastructure and hope that the people will come. Through information and promotion, we inspire changes in personal behavior by encouraging people to incorporate walking and biking into their daily lives.
We believe that these changes in public policy, public infrastructure, and personal behavior will guarantee a future where trails, biking, and walking are central to our lives. But we need research and data to be sure that this work is being done efficiently and equitably. Over the past several years, RTC has invested millions of dollars in building a suite of innovative research tools that allow us to understand and advocate for active transportation like never before. These tools are designed to forecast the impact that trails will have on a community. We can model and predict trail usage and estimate ROI based on transportation, environment, and health outcomes, giving communities the data they need to advocate for investments in trail infrastructure. Our most powerful tool, Bikeable, analyzes the connectivity of the community, helping places understand the impact and the importance of low-stress bicycle routes. This analysis can be used to benchmark existing conditions, as well as the impact of proposed projects on the network. It measures effectiveness by comparing neighborhoods, disadvantaged and underserved communities, and access to priority destinations. One critical component of the Bikeable tool is its ability to focus on equity. Data can be analyzed to better understand how a network serves specific populations, giving us the data we need to be sure that investments in new biking infrastructure serve everyone who's living in a community. We recently applied Bikeable to our work in Milwaukee so that we could better understand how two significant trail projects would affect connectivity in the most underserved neighborhoods in the city. What we found was awe-inspiring. Investing in two specific projects has the potential to connect more than 200,000 people to a trail, creating new active transportation opportunities for entire segments of the city that had previously been isolated without cars and without safe biking and walking networks. Tools like Bikeable that help us measure and prioritize low-stress bicycle routes are key to helping us reach new audiences. When our communities are designed to support those who are interested in biking but concerned about safety, we can get families and new and nervous riders out and on a bike. The more people out biking, the more people feel safe walking and biking in the community, and the more active transportation becomes part of our culture.
The rail trail movement was born at a time when disruption was wreaking havoc on the railroad industry in the 1980s. This disruption created the opportunity to build trails spanning the vast North American continent, as the railroad once did. Our movement has been far more successful than anyone could have ever imagined in the 1980s. But our work is far from over. Today, we have the opportunity to take our work to another level. By focusing on connectivity, we can create regional trail systems with rail trails as the spines. In building such systems, we should not limit ourselves to past practices. We should seize the opportunity to explore new frontiers in trail building resulting from the disruptions caused by the age of connectivity. With these disruptions, we can augment regional trail systems by recapturing some of the existing roadway from the automobile to create ribbons of green traversing America's communities. Working together, we can reclaim our roadways, creating safe and inviting space for people to be physically active, particularly in places where the need is the greatest. It's not hard to imagine a future where trails and biking are at the heart of the 21st century community, a future where we invest in healthier places for healthier people. This is one of my favorite quotes. This future is already emerging in places across America. The revolution to put trails, biking, and walking at the heart of our communities is happening right now. places are being transformed as we speak. Changes will occur in the next 5 to 15 years that we can hardly envision today. It will be up to all of us to have the imagination and the courage to seize the opportunities the future will provide to create communities designed for people and not for cars. We cannot do this alone, and we cannot do this without you. We need your help to advocate for policies that prioritize trails, biking, and walking. We need your support in the places where trail networks are growing to ensure new investments exist to building connected trail systems to encourage more people to get out and walk and bike in their communities. And in places that haven't yet uncovered their trail networks, we need help to help seed that idea in communities across America. Together, we can connect corridors and create infrastructure that encourages biking and walking as part of our daily life.
Now we're happy to take questions. I'm just gonna, sorry for the close-up, everybody. We'll see if there's any comments from anyone. I don't see any yet. Keith, is there anything you want to add, or Katie, about what people can expect in just a few short weeks at the Trail Nation Summit while we wait for questions?
Well, we wanted to share this presentation. I think some of you may have seen it before if you were at the International Trail Symposium last spring, but this is a good framing for how RTC is sort of talking about our vision and how our Trail Nation projects fit into this vision, and how we're hoping to more broadly connect with the Trail Nation Collaborative, the other 12 networks that are joining us in Milwaukee, to really spread this like wildfire, create models that can be replicated. We're inviting 20 communities to come, but we're seeing this happen in 80, 100, 120 places. So we're hoping that when we're all together, and I cannot believe it's in like 2 or 3 weeks, that we really have a chance to kind of incubate this as an idea that, okay, we are a broader coalition of people all working towards the same goal, and we can leverage each other's expertise and challenges and experiences to really move this work forward.
I think the other thing that'll be really interesting when we come together is that we're going to be digging into some of the real fundamental practices to successful trail network development. I think a lot of folks have been exposed at this stage to the concept of the Trail Nation Playbook, so the 6 kind of key fundamental activities that we're pursuing in all the places where we're working, trying to share those ideas to really make the development of trail networks happen quickly and be able to be replicated in a lot of places. But we're also going to use our time together to explore big ideas about trails and connectivity and mobility and what the future looks like. So this is a taste of what one of those plenaries is going to dig into a bit. We're also going to have conversations about equity. What does it look like to intentionally put a focus on equity as we're planning our trail development and our trail networks, and kind of the impact on community as all of this work comes to the forefront. We'll be talking about funding. How do we inspire people to invest in these projects in a deep way? And talking about how trails are an important solution to big problems that our country is facing. Problems around health, problems around equity and access to physical activity, challenges with mobility and transportation solutions, and issues around the environment and economic development. So there'll be so much big thinking and then really fundamental roll up our sleeves thinking. It's a jam-packed couple of days. And we think everyone will have a lot of fun.
Speaking of jam-packed couple of days, the agenda, the full detailed agenda is coming either at the very end of this week or early next week. I know a lot of you have asked for kind of specifics on how those days will play out. I do have a draft kind of outline agenda if anybody would like to see that. It'll give you a good feel for start and end time for every day, but we're gonna do a big ol' information dump in the next few days so that you have a really good feel of what this conference is going to be about and how you're plugging into it specifically. So apologies for the delay on that. We've had a few moving parts as conferences tend to do.
That's right. That's right.
And just in closing, I wanted to make it clear that a lot of what we were just talking about today may seem very futuristic to some people. And at the same time, as Brandi said, we're going to be diving into a lot of the nuts and bolts about how you build these trail systems. But one thing that we also want to challenge people to think about is that over the next 5 to 10 years, as we build these systems, that effort is going to be converging with these big changes that will be underway across the country in our communities that are being driven by technology. And so even though we know we're not going to solve this notion of disruption and mobility in Milwaukee, we want to make sure that we're at least putting these issues out there so that people begin to say, how do we anticipate this change and build it into our plans to create connected walking and biking and trail networks?
Okay, we've had a couple of questions come in. The first one is from Kathleen Aragon, and she asks, can you give examples of some of the most recent trail-friendly cities in rural states that have a consistent funding stream? And what is that funding mechanism?
I think that in rural states, there's a variety of funding streams. There is always the Transportation Alternatives Program through the U.S. Department of Transportation that's available to all communities. In addition to that, there is also the Recreational Trails Program, and that which is also through the U.S. Department of Transportation. And that program is often more used in rural communities. And in addition, one reason that program is important is that those funds can be used not only for trail development and creation, but also for trail maintenance. And it's really the only pot of federal money that can be used for that specific purpose. At Rails Trails Conservancy, we have big plans to try to greatly increase that particular pot of money for the Recreational Trails Program in the next transportation reauthorization bill, which we expect to probably happen around 2020.
Yeah, Brandi's whispering in my ear. We've seen, thanks in large part to the Laughlin Family Foundation, but lots of trail development going on in rural Arkansas. I think in instances where you can have a private funder sort of seed the initial stages of this kind of work, you then see public funding streams more easily unlocked. Oftentimes, some of the streams that Keith mentioned will need a match, and so cultivating those private relationships at the local level is really important as well.
And I'll just add, for a project that hasn't yet been built yet, but that people are just clamoring as soon as that corridor is available. I don't know if any of our Missouri friends are on the line, but the Rock Island line in Missouri has a lot of the small towns that are along the route have locked in their funding, some from federal sources, as Keith has shared, and others through different fundraising avenues, so that as soon as that corridor is available to be built into a trail, they've got the money locked in and ready to go. And so sometimes it's about taking that big 145-mile corridor and breaking it up into the parts, and really having jurisdictions working together in a creative way and collaboratively to get the money in place. All right, next question. I'm very interested, this is from Tony Collins, I'm very interested in the equity aspect of this initiative. I'm also intrigued by the connection to smart mobility. My question, is there a chance you'll include the presentation ahead of time for our review? Well, I think this presentation is recorded, and we'll be able to share that as well as all the other webinars that we've done. For the presentations that are happening at the Trail Nation Summit, they won't be available in advance, but everything will be available after the fact. So we are planning to record and live stream the plenary discussions. So the Planning for Equity session, for example, will be available online in real time during the summit, and then available for folks to access afterwards. And then for the other sessions, those breakout sessions, we'll make sure that all of those presentations are available to folks after the fact. But if you're looking to kind of get ready and dig into some stuff in advance, all of these webinars will be recorded and available to folks. Sterling Stone asks, how does equity and access figure into this future with whole communities that are currently disconnected via road, sidewalk, and trail? How can we ensure access for disenfranchised communities that have been consistently forgotten in the planning?
Well, I think that a lot of this would sound like a process question, Sterling, but I think that it's a matter of just making sure that people have a seat at the table. We're going to be seeing huge changes taking place, and we need to make sure that the planning process associated with addressing those changes is fully inclusive, and that everybody gets a seat at the table, so that we don't end up with the kind of situation we had when the last huge change like this in our infrastructure occurred back in the 50s and 60s, when highways were put through urban communities in a way that was incredibly destructive. I think we now have the opportunity to get it right, and if we maintain that focus on equity and community involvement, I think we have an opportunity to create a very different outcome from the kinds of changes that we're going to be seeing in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think there's another element to this conversation that RTC ourselves are just starting to explore, and that's where does affordable housing fit into this conversation? The availability of infrastructure may not be just for walking and biking, and we fully support that in terms of whatever a community would need. So if it is needing to be repurposed for housing for lower income communities, that's something that is bubbling up as part of this conversation as well, and we'll be starting to kind of touch on some of those themes during this plenary session. You've got a representative from LISC and a couple of other organizations that are working very closely on the housing issue and how it intersects with active transportation infrastructure.
Not just add, I think, a really important thing we can be doing to ensure that the future and all of the changes that are happening are done in an equitable way is to be asking these questions, and not just of each other, but of our local elected officials, of the people who are making the decisions about what's being built and how it's being built. We've been having this talk and this conversation with a lot of folks all across the country, and one of my favorite questions is, well, what can we do to make sure that trails are part of this future in this equation? And I say, are you going to the city council meetings? Are you asking the questions? And then they'll say yes, and then they'll ask, well, hey, but we're not talking about autonomous vehicles. And then my response is, ask the question. What are we doing to plan for new technology? What are we doing to plan for the sharing economy, for ride share, for new bike share? How are we making sure that all of that remains affordable and that we're building in biking and walking? And if you ask the question, and you keep asking the question, and you get 5 friends to ask the question, it'll start to bubble up and people are going to have to answer it. I don't think that there's a silver bullet yet, but I think all of us really kind of seeding the idea and saying that there's a new opportunity here to think differently about what we've been doing wrong for a really long time is important. We've got a question that Anthony over here is holding up for us about more on Bikeable. If you're interested in Bikeable, I would say reach out. Probably easiest, everyone has Katie's contact. Reach out to Katie. She can connect you with our research director, who is really heading up the Bikeable initiative. And Shane Farthing, some of you might know on the line, he can talk to you about what we're doing and whether we can do it in your community.
And we will be having a breakout session that will go into greater detail on Bikeable. I can't remember the exact title, but it's like making the case. So essentially, what tools are RTC has RTC rolled out, and are we planning to roll out to really help with this sort of efficient and equitable build out of trail networks, with Bikeable being kind of the crown jewel of that suite of tools for right now. So you can learn lots more at the summit, and then I'm happy to connect with anyone on email, and I can share some links and connect you to Shane.
All right, I think that's the list. Needless to say, we are so excited to connect with everybody. We can't wait to get to Milwaukee. We have so much really great content in store. I think it is going to be a rich and fulfilling few days. So I know I've got a whole team of communications folks coming to gather all the content because we're so excited about what's happening there. So we hope you are too.
Yeah, bring your game face. Everybody just get ready to ask questions. And this is really a great opportunity to network. Like we said, there are networks, trail networks being built all over the place, but without our personal networks and leveraging those, this will happen a lot slower. So this is our first chance to really kind of seed a lot of those conversations. So really leverage your time there. We'll have lots of networking breaks and good connections in the breakout sessions. So thanks to everybody for your participation in all these webinars since the last one of the series, but we will share all of the recordings, and see you in Milwaukee.
See you in Milwaukee.
Thank you.